Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else?
Hello, hardworking Americans. Thanks for tuning into the Shrewsbury Show. I am your host, Colleen Shrewsbury. I want to talk about healthcare because this is an issue very important to me, and I would imagine that it's very important to most of the people out there listening. We went through a lot as a nation with Obamacare, and there are some people out there proposing the resurrection of this colossal disaster. What's worse is the proposals for Medicare for All, which would be even worse than Obamacare. We all know that Obamacare was designed to fail. The snakes that conned us into it knew that it would create a horrendous disaster. Their goal was to turn the healthcare industry into such a disaster that we would cry Uncle Sam and ask for the government to fix the problem that they created in the first place. There is a 2020 candidate out there proposing a health plan that would cost $60 trillion over the course of 10 years. I'll give you a hint as to who's proposing this harebrained scheme. His name starts with S and ends with Anders. So let's go over the financials of this for a minute. Medicare for All would cost $60 trillion over 10 years. The entire annual U.S. economy is about $13 trillion a year. The average annual federal budget is $4 trillion. We already can't afford the spending that we do now. We owe almost twice what we make in a year. And none of that includes unpaid liabilities like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They already want to cancel all student loan debt and give everybody free college, which isn't free. It just means that you'll be paying at least 70 cents out of every dollar you make to the government for all the free goodies that they want to pass out. To quote the inimitable Milton Friedman, there's no such thing as a free lunch. The financial cost of Medicare for All, or any type of single-payer healthcare, is not the only problem. It's not even the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that single-payer healthcare inevitably leads to rationing and death panels. The government can tell you what procedures you can and cannot have. If you're 75 or older and need a hip replacement, you're out of luck. If you need cancer treatment at that age, you're not going to get it. People die, or at the very least, languish in pain and agony with a condition that started as minor but turned serious while waiting for care. According to an article from The Times UK, the National Health Service of the UK figures show that the number of people who pass away awaiting an initial hospital consultation rose by more than 50% between 2013 and 2017. The concept of a single-payer healthcare system is very communist in nature. I'm going to read you a little bit of an anecdote of someone who has lived through socialized medicine in the former Soviet Union. This is from an article at the Gatestone Institute, International Policy Council. Having grown up in communist Romania, I remember after feeling ill being taken to the polyclinic, to a room full of other sick people, all entitled to free care. Some were there to receive permission slips to miss work due to their ailments. Others were there for injections. Still others were so ill that they could barely stand. The system was first come, first served. Everyone received a number and waited, as at a food counter, to see a medical professional. Sitting on the floor was forbidden. Sometimes we would be forced to stand for an entire day, occasionally until nightfall, before being examined by an overworked doctor who supplemented his egalitarian income with monetary or material bribes from patients seeking quicker access and better care. After performing a perfunctory examination, the doctor would give us a prescription and send us away. The trouble was that the pharmacy in the nearby shopping complex had as little stock on its shelves as every other store in the country. The pharmacist, who had no ingredients with which to prepare the antibiotic the doctor had prescribed, would simply shrug and continue to earn his state income for doing nothing. When my mother and I would return home empty-handed, my father would go out to find the medication on the black market. paying at least 10 times the official price to obtain it. In spite of the harsh sentences presented to sellers and buyers on the black market, many were willing to take the risk and extremely grateful. It was the only way to fill the prescription, which was supposed to be free in the communist paradise. After the triumph of obtaining the antibiotic, one found oneself in possession of a mixed blessing. The cardboard capsules were the size of horse pills, so large that even adults had difficulty swallowing them. For children, it was nearly impossible. All attempts at getting down the huge pill without having bitter powder fill my mouth were unsuccessful. Moving to the United States, where doctors were paid on the basis of merit and hard work, not according to a bogus ideological equality imposed by a central omnipotent government and its bureaucrats, was a blessing. American millennials, a majority of whom seem to believe in ideological social experiments that may have failed broadly elsewhere, have no clue about the literal and figurative bitter pill that people living under socialist and communist regimes are forced to swallow. People are already dying in the U.S. from the black market of illegal drugs, and they're also dying from the existing black market for prescription drugs, which would probably become far worse under this socialized medicine. And if we have a black market of medications, we have no idea what is in those pills. They could all be laced with who knows what. Waiting rooms in hospitals and doctors' offices would undoubtedly be filled to capacity on a daily basis, all day, every day. The few doctors that would be left in the medical care industry would be forced to see all of them, overworking them, overstretching them, reducing the quality of care that any patient receives. Right now, the average appointment time with a primary care physician is probably about 20 minutes. Some doctors do 40-minute appointments. You can only imagine if there is a waiting room full of about 100 people, what's going to happen throughout the day. Your appointment time that was already short by 20 minutes is probably going to be reduced down to about 5 minutes. That is barely enough time to describe what's going on, to check your vitals and put things in your medical records, and to give you an exam as to the symptoms that you've just described, and then for the doctor to educate you on what is going on with you and to prescribe any kind of medication or refer you to a specialist if necessary. You would just be rushed out the door and forced to accept that, okay, well, I saw the doctor, maybe I'm getting better. Hat tip to the independent UK. It's widely known that nurses in the UK under the NHS system, the National Healthcare System, are extremely overworked and stretched to the limit. As of 2017, October 2017, there were about 24,000 nursing positions vacant. Nurses are facing serious challenges in the job because of increased demands on their time. Recent figures which show a 96% drop in nurses from the EU registering to practice in the UK post-Brexit adds to the gloom of the system. Some nurses said that they are reduced to tears on a daily basis, and that shortages in nursing numbers was negatively affecting their ability to care for patients. These are human beings that we're expecting to perform miracles. We're expecting one person to do the work of 10 people. It's impossible. There is no way that you can receive quality care under a system like that. And if you think that it can't happen here, think again. We already have issues with sparse budgets in medical care here in the U.S. and overworked nurses who can't provide the quality of care that they know they need to for patients. And here's something that I didn't know. Between 210,000 and 440,000 patients die at hospitals each year as a result of medical errors. This is a hat tip to Healthline. Those can happen when a nurse is exhausted or not given the authority to make critical decisions. I also didn't know this, that apparently under the Affordable Care Act, there was a rush to get Medicare patients home within a 30-day period, which gave nurses less time to help patients better manage their long-term treatment. If we already have sparse budgets in hospitals and we already have overworked nurses and probably overworked doctors, the same thing is going to continue under Medicare for All, if not worse. I think that it would be more like that communist waiting room that I told you about earlier. When I was in grad school, I will never forget this. I had a professor in my diplomacy class who said, if you ever get sick, just make sure that you don't do it outside the U.S. And he was absolutely right. There's a reason for that. We trust our medical care here in the U.S. because we trust the brilliance of the people running it. And that's because, for the most part, it's not the government. Anything the government does, they run it into the ground. Do you know that single-payer healthcare is so horrendous that people in Canada and in the UK pay for private insurance on top of the exorbitant taxes that they pay for single-payer healthcare because the quality of care is just that bad? A good number of Canadians come into the U.S. for healthcare because ours is far better than what's available in Canada. People come from all around the world to receive healthcare in the United States because it is known the world over that we have the best medical care in the world. It's not often that we hear about people seeking care outside the U.S. unless it's for some kind of treatment or surgery that the FDA hasn't approved, or the rare chance that the necessary experimental treatment is unfamiliar to American doctors. We went through all of this before with Obamacare. The Democrats were very cryptic about exactly what it was. Nobody understood it, and in fact, they wouldn't tell us what was in the legislation before they rammed it through Congress. I believe Nancy Pelosi's words at the time were, "We have to pass the bill to find out what's in it." Obama, the biggest liar in politics, second only to Hillary Clinton, went on all the talk shows telling us if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. And we all found out what a crock that was when people were separated from their doctors and dropped from their insurance plans. That doesn't even begin to touch the continuous rise in premiums. According to Forbes magazine, in the first 4 years of the Affordable Care Act, every age group and household type experienced an increase of between 56% and 63.2%. The dollar amounts of the increase varied from $2,524 for an individual between the ages of 31 and 40 to $12,040 for a family headed by someone over age 60. There's no doubt that Obamacare was a significant factor in the Republican majorities in the House and Senate in 2010 and 2014. I suppose if people really understand just what this Medicare for All nonsense is, and they remember how miserable everyone was under Obamacare, if these 2020 candidates keep pushing this farce, it may just help Republicans win back the House and possibly pick up a few seats in the Senate in 2020. If the country thought Obama was too progressive and Democrats lost 1,000 seats in government across the country, which incidentally led to the progressives' worst nightmare, Donald Trump, I don't know what makes them think that becoming even more progressive than Obama is going to do them any favors. If anything, it's the best promotion for the Republican Party we could ever ask for. You ever notice how evasive these people are when you ask them questions? Obama never explained what his health plan really was. All he did was run around lying about keeping your doctor and keeping your plan if you wanted to, which turned out to be entirely untrue. I don't think these lefties are really explaining exactly what Medicare for All would entail either. You've got the most irritating member of Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, running around telling people no one is heartbroken at the thought of losing their private health insurance and trying to shame everyone into accepting it. I'm positive that that is not true. I, for one, love my private health insurance, and I absolutely refuse to give it up. Hat tip hot air. Camilla Harris is suspiciously and conspicuously evasive when anyone confronts her on Medicare for All. She stumbles and fumbles her way through telling anyone who questions her that, quote, supplemental private insurance will still exist if she becomes president. She only mentions when forced to that supplemental insurance is for unnecessary treatments like tummy tucks and the like. I'm curious to know if we would be required to purchase supplemental insurance under Medicare for All. They forced us to have insurance under Obamacare or pay high taxes or a tax penalty. Obamacare was so bad that people chose to pay the penalty instead. Government came in to save the day again, helping people who couldn't afford health insurance by forcing them to buy health insurance. Doctors left the profession because of Obamacare. Imagine what it would be like under Medicare for All. It just wouldn't pay to go through medical school for a cool $300,000, and then be forced to receive a 40% reduction in salary. That's what Bernie wants, or thinks is going to happen anyway. He seems to think that in order to be able to afford single-payer health care, hospitals and doctors' offices would reduce operating costs by 40%. He never goes any further than that in explanation, though. He doesn't mention that this would mean doctors would either quit or be laid off, and the same goes for nurses and other medical personnel. I have a question about funding of this plan. If Medicare for All is taxpayer funded, how do you get that money? Is it taxed from our paychecks? Are you taxing us, making MFA obligatory? That's what happened with Obamacare. Obamacare was a tax, like Social Security. What if we don't want MFA? Would private insurance be illegal? If private insurance were outlawed, I'm fairly certain it would be unconstitutional for the government to shut down an entire industry. And if it's not outlawed, private insurance would go under by default because they couldn't possibly make it when most people would be on government insurance. I doubt insurance companies could hang their hats on supplemental insurance for tummy tucks or on government care being so bad that people would pay out of pocket for private insurance the way that they do in Canada and the UK. And worse than that, if the private health insurance industry were to go under, there is next to no chance of ever reviving it again, and not to mention ever reviving the healthcare industry that we have in this country now, that is second to none. What would we do then? About a year and a half ago, I myself was on Medicaid because I couldn't find a job for a very long time, and I developed a condition that required ongoing care. I didn't have insurance, obviously, because I didn't have a job at the time, and I was forced to go on Medicaid, which, yes, it did help, but I was very limited in my access to healthcare when I needed it the most. Getting private insurance opened doors to the care that I needed, and not every doctor accepts Medicaid, but that's their choice to make. So logically, I would have to ask, would all medical care providers be required to accept Medicare for All? And these socialists have declared healthcare a right. When you do that, you create an obligation on someone else, the doctor. Well, if the doctor can't afford to treat someone who can't pay for treatment, in fact, many who can't afford treatment, but the doctor is obligated by the state to treat these people, you're going to put the doctor out of business. And then you would wind up denying health care to the people you said you wanted to help because now the care they needed is unavailable. It still costs money to administer medical care. Medical supplies are not free. Doctors and nurses do not work for free for the most part. The city treating the water running through the doctor's office or the hospital likes to be paid. So does the electrical company providing power to the hospital, the gas company running the heat, and the telephone company providing telephone and internet access. You have to pay for all of those computers and field-specific software that we now use, and not to mention the food in the cafeteria, the salaries of the cooks, secretaries, janitors, phlebotomists, lab techs, and other staff. We have the tremendous privilege of living in a country with the best medical care in the world. We cannot ruin that. Listen to some of the things that have been accomplished through private medicine that would be absolutely impossible under single-payer health care, which is exactly what Medicare for All is. We have discovered treatments for HIV. HIV is no longer a death sentence. People are able to live with it, to deal with it, and live long and healthy lives. We have cancer treatments previously unavailable, vaccines for things like measles, mumps, rubella, and polio, and smallpox, all things that used to kill people. We have an understanding of autism and ways to treat children who have autism. We have an understanding and treatment of mental illness, whereas we used to just lock these people away from society. We have life-saving antibiotics. We have organ transplants, laparoscopic surgery. We have the potential to continue doing incredible medical research for treatments of things like cancer, for the possibility of coming up with a cure for cancer. If we institute Medicare for All, or any similar program, all of that is wiped away. And it is my firm belief that anyone who dies under the socialist medical system that these people are proposing, their blood is on government's hands.